Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we take a look at the comic book storyline, Batman, Rise of the Batmen. Rise of the Batman is the opening Detective Comics arc of DC's Rebirth, whatever that's really supposed to mean. Written by James Tynion IV and penciled by Eddie Barrows and Alvaro Martinez, it was published across 7 issues of the new Detective Comics title, which is actually the old one. With Rebirth they went back to the pre-New 52 numbering, so now we're back at 900 something issues, which I love. DC, never restart the numbering on Detective Comics ever again. And why the hell haven't you gone back to the old numbering with Batman yet? Shame on you. Anyway, in the arc, Batman discovers that a secret organization has come to Gotham, and they're monitoring and targeting all of the city's vigilantes. In order to survive and combat this new threat, Batman realizes that he has to organize all of Gotham's crime fighters and form an army of his own. Recruiting Batwoman, Robin, Orphan, Spoiler, and Clayface, Batman builds up his team and puts Batwoman, an ex-military, in charge of training them. Later they discover that their enemy is in fact an army of Batmen, calling themselves the Colony, who's led by Batwoman's own father, Colonel Jacob Kane. Admiring Batman and his work, they model themselves after him and plans to bring crime fighting to the next level. The Colony believes that simply fighting gangsters and maniacs in Gotham City is a waste of potential, and feels that the symbol of Batman should guard the entire planet. Their goal is to combat threats on a global scale and act as a covert black ops unit, eliminating terrorism and toppling dictators. The Colony's targeting of the Bat family members was in fact part of their scheme to eventually try and recruit them to their cause. So I've finally read my first Rebirth comic. I honestly don't understand what this whole Rebirth thing is supposed to be. I mean, it's obviously not a reboot, as they mention stuff from the New 52 in this story. Maybe somebody can enlighten me and others who are a bit confused down in the comments as to just what exactly DC Rebirth is. So of course, as usual, I'm going to heavily focus on the rogues, as that's what I'm all about. So if you want a review of this arc that talks a lot about the heroes, there's plenty of other YouTubers who's done that. Anyway, I'm not that into modern comic books, which you may have noticed. I generally prefer stuff from the 70s, 80s and 90s. I'm not a big fan of Grant Morrison and Scott Snyder's runs. My Batman is the one by the likes of Alan Grant, Chuck Dixon, Jerry Conway and Doug Monk. So keeping that in mind, I wasn't really expecting that much of the new old Detective Comics. The only real reason I got it is because of Clayface joining the Bat family. That seemed so weird and interesting that I just had to find out what it was all about. So let's start there, shall we? Clayface. So the Clayface we get here is the original one, Basil Karlo, who was reinvented by the New 52. I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be that same new Karlo, and there are no other Clayfaces around. The Basil Karlo we meet in this story is a very sympathetic guy, a former actor, and we find him broken out of Arkham sitting in a movie theater watching one of his old films. He hasn't hurt anybody and isn't planning to. All he wanted was to watch his old self before he became a freak. At this point, Batman and Batwoman arrive on the scene, showing sympathy and understanding, and then recruits him into their team. For the rest of the story, he's just one of the Bat family members, fighting alongside the heroes against the Colony. I gotta say, I'm pretty disappointed with Clayface here. The comic doesn't really explore him at all, but I can understand that, as it is focusing on telling a big story about Batman versus the Colony instead. So what was the point of putting Karlo in the team? I don't really see any, except that they wanted a guy with cool powers. But for that, they could have used any one of hundreds of DC characters. Why choose an old classic Bat-rogue for the role? Why is Karlo such a good guy in this story anyway? He's never had a history of being portrayed that way. In fact, in most of his stories, Basil is a self-absorbed, narcissistic, psychotic killer. He's generally one of the craziest villains in Batman's rogues gallery. In other words, just the type of guy I like. Tynion's portrayal of Karlo feels like it came completely out of the blue to me. Maybe I'm missing something. Perhaps Basil reformed in some New 52 comic that I've missed. If so, let me know in the comments. But if he didn't, then Tynion drastically changed a character just so he could include him in his little superhero squad. Now, I do love sympathetic and tragic villains, but I don't like it when they're full-on superheroes. unless the transition is done really well, like it was in Ed Brubaker's Catwoman run. Of course, Selina Kyle, the morally ambiguous thief, had a far shorter stretch to cross over into superheroics than the insane Basil Karlo. Let's talk about the actual villains of this arc, Colonel Kane and the Colony. That sounds like a good name for a band. So just like we got during Morrison and Snyder's run, here we have a secret, all-powerful group hiding out in Gotham City as the big enemy. The Colony's main target in this story is the League of Shadows, a mysterious sub-branch of Ra's al Ghul's League of Assassins. They are considered to be merely a myth by most, but Kane firmly believes that they are real and have infiltrated Gotham City at every level. By the way, pretty cool that we had the League of Shadows from the Nolan movies in the comics now as well. For most of the story we're led to believe that Kane is just paranoid, but later on they do hint that the League of Shadows is in fact real and present in Gotham. Now I haven't read beyond this arc, but most of you probably already know, but it sure seems like the League of Shadows are going to be the villains in future issues. If so, then we have yet another secret society as the villains. Whatever happened to disfigured supervillains pulling off bank jobs? Even though I do prefer the old-fashioned rogues, I gotta admit Colonel Kane is a pretty fascinating villain. He's not really a villain, as he's trying to make the world a safer place. He's just a bit misguided, maybe. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure who's right here, the Colonel or Batman. Sure, Kane's methods are too excessive, as he's willing to sacrifice hundreds of innocents in order to get to the League of Shadows' sleeper agents. Surely there must have been a better way to get to them. But disregarding that, I think he argues for a good point. I found myself questioning Batman's methods many times, and I'm not sure if he's really doing any good. He saves some people here and there, but is Batman really making the world a better place by punching muggers and pimps? Like Batfleck said in Batman vs Superman, criminals are like weeds. Pull one up and another grows in its place. A meaningless action, no matter how well intended, is still meaningless. But at the same time, is it really up to just one person or one unit in this case to try and solve all the world's problems? How do we know that this unit is always on the side of right? Maybe at times they won't be working in the best interests of everyone. It's too much power in the hands of a few, just like a one-world government would be. And in the end, I think they would fail anyway. Nobody will ever be able to solve all the world's problems. Maybe that's what Batman has realized, and the best course of action is to make a smaller stand, like say protecting a city. That's a more manageable task, and as one of the oldest sons of Gotham, completely justified too, in my opinion. I want to briefly mention a few other characters. Kate Kane, aka Batwoman. I thought she was really interesting in this story. It was great to see her background with the military and her past with Bruce and his family. They are cousins after all. I often forget that, which makes the villain of this story Batman's uncle. That's pretty interesting. The Waynes and the Kanes. I haven't really read many Batwoman stories, to be honest. I've mostly just seen her pop up in old Silver Age Batman comics. And yeah, that was a very different Batwoman. This is by far the best Batwoman story I've read. Just the fact that the main villain that she's forced to go up against is her own father is absolutely fascinating. I do wish that Kate was a bit more torn between the Colonel and Batman though, as she's pretty damn willing to just go and pound on her old dad right away. But maybe that's changed in later issues, especially if the League of Shadows turns out to be real. I also really liked Tim Drake, aka Robin, in this story. He's got an interesting plot going on about wanting to quit the superhero biz in order to pursue his own dreams. I think that's very in character, as Tim never had that obsessive drive like Bruce and Dick. The last character I want to mention is Ulysses Hadrian Armstrong, aka the General. This is actually an old forgotten Batman villain from the early 90s, who's reimagined here. It took me a while before I finally realized that it was supposed to be the General. In this story, Ulysses is a teenager with a genius-level intellect, and Colonel Kane's tech guy. He's a pretty interesting dude, as he comes off as kind of sadistic, yet he's very cheerful and seems to be a big fan of Batman and the Bat family. Ulysses even wears a t-shirt with the Bat logo on it. I will most likely cover the General in Forgotten Batman villains, that is unless he now suddenly becomes a big character. I don't have too much to say about the artwork. It's good, sometimes gorgeous, and never really fails, but it's not my favorite Batman art by any means. I love the more modern design of Batwoman, all that red and her hair swaying in the wind. I do not like Batman's Rebirth redesign though. The yellow outline around the Bat logo is obviously supposed to evoke the classic yellow oval, but I don't think it looks good. Also, that purple lining of the cape. What were they thinking? Is that supposed to evoke his purple gloves from his first appearance? If so, why? They looked stupid and were removed for a reason. My printings of that comic even have them recolored blue. It's like they were trying to hide that embarrassing design choice. And now they want to call back to it? I wasn't the biggest fan of the new 52 suit, but this is just awful. Well, I doubt it'll last too long, as I haven't heard a single person say anything positive about it. So, in conclusion, Clayface was a disappointment here, which is a shame as he was the main draw for me. The story itself is pretty good though, and I can't really complain about it. It just isn't really my type of Batman story. I also prefer it when Batman works alone, or with one Robin at the most. So I'm not really sure if this team book is for me. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to pick up the next trade, so we'll see. Anyway, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.